I come to the letter by Comrade Joseph O'Connor Meldrew in this week's edition of the paper, where he says, well, we in SPEW, you in the CPGB, we basically have the same position on Israel-Palestine. We stand for two states. You sort of stand for two states because you call for the withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza, from the West Bank. You know, what's the difference? You're being unfair. Comrade, I'm very glad that you've sent the letter. It's good that you're reading the Weekly Worker, but I think you've got, to use a phrase, the wrong end of the stick here. It's true that if you have a superficial reading of what we have to say, you can find points of convergence. You know, that's true. But actually, we start off from a radically different viewpoint. As the comrade explains in his letter, they start from the point of view that you can win a socialist Palestine alongside a socialist Israel. And a socialist Israel will come about fundamentally, and I don't think I'm putting words in the mouths of the comrades, from working class unity that's brought about through trade union type struggles. So you can have the unity between the Arab working class and the Hebrew working class in Israel about pay and conditions. And this can win you socialism. And in the West Bank and in Gaza, essentially the same struggle can take place. And therefore, you know, both peoples can be one, or the working class of both peoples can be one to, well, let's have a socialism in both countries. We'll have a two-state solution. Fine, except it won't work. That's the problem, comrade. That what you find in Israel is that any attempt to raise trade union politics can only go so far. So of course there's trade union politics over pay, over conditions, over employment, of course. But once you raise high politics, do you support your government in a war? Do you support the withdrawal of troops from the West Bank and Gaza? Do you support equal rights inside Israel? Do you support Israel as a Zionist project? Do you support Israel as a Jewish state? Once you raise these questions, suddenly trade union unity disintegrates, and what you get is the politics of sectionalism, national politics. And of course, the Israeli working class, in my view at least, is a labor aristocracy. It's a privileged section of the population compared with the Arab section of the population. And although its privileges have been eroded since 1948, not least, you know, in the 80s, 90s, and all the rest of it, they are there. And all the Israeli, you know, ruling class needs to do is raise these the politics of nation, the politics of security, and working class unity disappears. Indeed, what you've had is a shift in the working class vote from where people used to vote Labour, you know, back in the 50s, back in the 60s, to where it's the working class that would tend to vote for Likud and parties to the right. Labour now is much more a party of the middle classes. But more importantly than that, the comrade then says that the existence of these two socialist states, an Israeli socialist state where Arabs apparently have equal rights, he doesn't specify what rights, but they have equal rights, a Palestine socialist state, this will be part of the struggle towards a socialist Middle East. Our starting point is exactly the opposite, that you have to have the struggle for socialism in the Middle East. We would say the struggle for Arab unity led by the working class. That has to be what comes first. And that enables you, if that can be made into a material force, if that can be made into a viable project, that is your lever that you can win over sections of the Israeli population, crucially the working class, to your project. So we approach it from the point of view of the regional working class, not from the point of view of how do we solve this problem within Israel stroke Palestine. Within Israel-Palestine, there is no solution. Only in the wider regional context is any sort of progressive solution feasible. And so, yes, we reject economism. We don't think it's a question. It's not that we reject trade union demands, but we don't think trade union demands in and of themselves are sufficient. They always prove inadequate. So we don't agree with the comrade. And we actually don't agree that you end up with two states. In our view, the Palestinians, I mean, in terms of how what borders you draw in the Middle East, all I would suggest, humbly suggest, is up to the future, for God's sake. But all you need to know is that the present day borders of the Middle East, and you can tell simply by looking at a map, as Trump says about Canada, they've all got straight lines. They were drawn by French and British colonialists. You know, the idea that we should keep Syria, Greater Syria, divided into, Lebanon, Palestine. So, of course, it's up to the future. I'm not saying anything, but the idea that you take that as sacrosanct strikes me as somewhat bizarre. But it's up to the future to do it. But the crucial question, yes, is the regional. That's what I would stress. I also think the comrade, this is moving on now, rather gives the game away when he talks about the party in Britain. He says, well, you want a mass communist party. We want to be where, the mass of workers are at. And he talks about the trade union movement, and he talks about Tusk. Well, we all know what Tusk is. It's worse than the Labour Party. It's not only tiny, it's worse than the Labour Party. Why? Because its federal structure actually gives trade union bureaucrats a veto, simply on the basis that we don't want to upset the Prison Officers Association or RMT or any other trade union that might care to join. Hence, I would suggest to the comrade his idea that all Marxist groups can join Tusk is, it's disproven by the facts. We did make our application at the beginning. We were turned down because apparently we lack social roots. Well, we readily confess we lack social roots. The problem is, comrades, so does Spew. I mean, I remember talking to Dave Nellist on the last demonstration. How many votes did you get, Dave? And I wasn't trying to persecute him, and he sort of mumbled, it's not, percent. Spew gets the same sort of miserable votes as we would get if we could stand under the banner CPGB. And we know that in terms of recently, remember the last general election, we're going to have a debate with our comrades in the Spartacist League. And they're telling us, oh, you should all join Tusk. And we were going, well, best of luck to you, comrades. They were rejected. They were turned down. And my humble suggestion would be one of the reasons they were turned down is their position, not my position, their position on prison officers and the Prison Officers Association. It shouldn't be allowed to affiliate to the TUC. I disagree with them, but I think this is what the Socialist Party was doing. They were acting as the censors. They were acting with the veto vote that the prison officers would have used if they'd been affiliated to Tusk. So the comrades' schema actually falls down. It's already been tested, comrades, and only good boys and girls on the left are allowed to join, not naughty people like the CPGB that might raise awkward questions, not even naughty people like the Spartacist League are allowed to join either. And again, I think the comrade gives it away by talking about a programmatic fudge between reform and revolution. Well, the fudge is you reject, actually, you don't fudge it, you reject revolution. Now, we don't stand for revolution. We don't lay out, this is when we're going to issue the arms, but we do stand by the old Chartist slogan, and that is peacefully if we can, violently if we must. And our best scenario is that we get a government elected, it's a majority government, and we take up arms to defend that government against what Marx and Engels talked about in the 19th century, referencing Britain, a slave owners' rebellion. Remember, they, supported the North in the Second Revolution there, the Civil War, and they looked to Britain. They said, Britain can have a peaceful revolution. You can say, yes, it's possible. No, it's not. But they used the example of America. You still will face potential slave owners' rebellion by the ruling class. So Marx talked about, give them bribes, throw money at these people, but you should still expect them to take up arms. And hence, if we have to use force, we will use force. And that needs to be made explicit. And that's why we raise, as a democratic demand, the question of a militia, right? How are you going to defend this government? You need to split the army. If you don't rely on the army, that would be naive. So we raise the question of abolishing the standing army. The comrade also says, oh, we agree with you on a federal republic. No, you don't, comrade. You actually stand for a breakaway Scotland. You stand for I don't know, do they stand for a breakaway Wales? I don't know. Either way, you trail nationalism. You trail it. This is the wrong method. We stand for a federal republic. I hope, actually, that when a working class government comes to power in Britain, we actually don't put into practice federalism. Federalism is not our principle. Centralism is. So yes, in conditions of the Middle East, offer the Israeli working class the possibility of federalism. I would hope in the future they would turn and say, we don't want federalism. We want to join fully into a centralized state. We fear nothing from our comrades in the Arab Socialist Republic. That's a hope. Centralism is our principle. Federalism is something that we take up in exceptional circumstances. Anyway.